Before we begin, we publish new content every day. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. They say that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we love the most. I never understood what that meant until I was 73 years old, standing in my own kitchen, watching my daughter rifle through my purse like I was already dead. My name is Margaret Walsh, and for 47 years, I believed that being a good mother meant saying yes to everything. Yes to babysitting when Jennifer had her book club. Yes to lending money when her husband lost another job. Yes to keeping quiet when she spoke to me like I was a child who had disappointed her once again. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in October. I was making my usual breakfast of oatmeal and coffee when the phone rang at exactly 8:30. Jennifer called with her daily list of needs, but this time was different. "Mom," she said, her voice carrying that particular edge that meant I was about to disappoint her somehow. "David and I have been talking, and we think it would be best if you moved into Sunset Manor." The spoon fell from my hand and clattered against the ceramic bowl. Sunset Manor was the assisted living facility where Mrs. Henderson from down the street had gone to die. I had visited her there once, walking through hallways that smelled of disinfectant and defeat. "I don't understand," I managed to say, though part of me understood perfectly. Jennifer had been dropping hints for months about how difficult it must be for me to maintain such a large house, how worried she was about me living alone. "The house is too much for you, Mom. You forgot to pay the electric bill last month, and Mrs. Chen called me because your newspapers were piling up on the porch. We've already put down a deposit. You can move in next week." I sat down heavily in the kitchen chair that had been mine for 37 years, in the house that Thomas and I had bought when Jennifer was just a baby. The newspapers had piled up because I had been in the hospital for 3 days with pneumonia. The electric bill had been late because I had been grieving the second anniversary of Thomas's death and had forgotten to mail it for exactly 4 days. "But sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I like my house. I like my garden, and my neighbors, and my book club at the library. Couldn't we talk about other options?" Jennifer sighed, and I could picture her rolling her eyes the way she had since she was 16. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. David and I have talked to a financial advisor, and the cost of keeping you in that house is just irresponsible. The manor is much more practical." Something cold settled in my stomach as the real meaning of her words became clear. Jennifer and David had already decided my future without consulting me. They had already chosen where I would spend my remaining years, had already signed papers and made deposits. "What about my things?" I asked quietly. "My furniture and my pictures and Thomas' workshop in the garage?" "We'll keep what makes sense," Jennifer said briskly. "The manor rooms are quite small, so you'll only need the basics. We can donate the rest to charity." After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, watching the leaves fall. Somewhere in the space between her words, I began to understand that my daughter had stopped seeing me as a person who might have opinions about her own life. The next morning, Jennifer arrived with her husband David and their teenage children. They came armed with boxes and packing tape and a cheerful efficiency that felt like violence. Jennifer had clearly briefed everyone on how to handle Grandma's emotional responses to this necessary transition. "Now, Mom," Jennifer said as she began wrapping my dishes in newspaper, "we need to be practical about this. You can only take one box of personal items to the manor, so let's focus on the things that are really important to you." I watched my daughter wrap the blue china plates that had been my mother's, the ones I had planned to pass down to her someday. When she picked up the small wooden jewelry box that Thomas had made for our first anniversary, I finally found my voice. "That stays with me," I said firmly. Jennifer paused, the box in her hands. "Mom, you don't really need a jewelry box at the manor. Most of your jewelry is just costume pieces anyway." I stood up and walked over to where she was standing. "Give me the box, Jennifer." Something in my voice must have surprised her, because she handed it over without argument. I held it against my chest, feeling the smooth wood that Thomas' hands had shaped with such care. Inside were my wedding ring, the pearl earrings Thomas had given me when Jennifer was born, and the small silver locket that had belonged to my grandmother. "This box contains my entire history," I said quietly. It contains the jewelry that marked every important moment of my life. And you want me to throw it away because it doesn't fit your idea of what I should need." Jennifer's face flushed. "You're being dramatic, Mom. No one said anything about dying. Sunset Manor is a lovely place with activities and proper meals and medical staff available 24 hours a day." I looked around the kitchen where I had made thousands of meals, where Jennifer had done her homework at the table by the window, where Thomas and I had shared our morning coffee every day for 47 years. Every scratch on the counter and scuff on the floor told a story that mattered to me. That afternoon, as the donation truck pulled away with most of my possessions, I sat on the front porch of my empty house and tried to understand how I had arrived at this moment. Jennifer came out to sit beside me, and for a brief moment, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she patted my hand and said, "You'll see, Mom. Once you adjust to the manor, you'll wonder why we waited so long to make this change." I realized then that Jennifer genuinely believed she was doing the right thing. In her mind, she was being a responsible daughter, making difficult decisions for a mother who could no longer be trusted to make them herself. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I walked through my empty house one last time. The rooms echoed with 47 years of memories, but they also whispered something else. They whispered that I still had choices to make. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea using the one mug Jennifer had deemed essential for my new life. I sat at the bare table and pulled out the notepad where I had spent so many years writing down Jennifer's requests. Instead of making a list of things I needed to do for someone else, I began making a list of things I wanted to do for myself. The first item I wrote was, find out if I can cancel the manor deposit. The second was, call a lawyer. The third was, take back my own life. I slept that night on an air mattress in my empty bedroom, but I slept better than I had in months. For the first time in years, I was making my own decisions about my own future. The next morning, I called Sunset Manor and spoke to the administrator. I explained that there had been a misunderstanding, that I had not personally agreed to the residency. The woman on the phone was surprisingly understanding. She explained that this situation happened more often than people might think. The deposit, she said, would be refunded within 10 business days. My next call was to Robert Chen, Mrs. Chen's son, who happened to be a lawyer specializing in elder rights. Robert came to see me that afternoon. He sat in my empty living room and listened while I explained what had happened. "Mrs. Walsh," he said when I finished, "what your daughter did was not illegal. But it wasn't ethical either. You have every right to make your own decisions about where and how you want to live, as long as you're mentally competent. And from our conversation today, it's clear that you are very much mentally competent." He helped me understand my options. I could continue to live in my house if that was what I wanted. I could make arrangements for home care if I needed assistance. Most importantly, I could take legal steps to ensure that no one could make these kinds of decisions for me without my explicit consent. That evening, I called my daughter to tell her about my change of plans. "Mom," Jennifer said after a long pause, "I think you're confused. We've already made all the arrangements. The manor is expecting you next week, and we've cleaned out the house. You can't just change your mind." "I can and I am," I replied. "I never agreed to move to Sunset Manor. You and David made that decision without consulting me, and I have decided that I want to continue living in my own home. But that's not practical, Mom. You can't live in an empty house. All your furniture is gone." "Then I'll buy new furniture," I said. "It might not be the same as what I had before, but it will be mine, chosen by me, for my own comfort and happiness." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. "Mom," she finally said, "I think you need to see a doctor. This kind of sudden change in judgment could be a sign of something serious." I felt something shift inside me, a kind of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. "Jennifer," I said carefully, "I am 73 years old. I have been making decisions for myself for over 50 years. I managed to raise you, maintain a marriage, run a household, and care for your father through his final illness. The only thing that has changed is that you have decided I am no longer capable of knowing my own mind." "But Mom." "No, Jennifer. I need you to listen to me now. I love you more than my own life, but I will not allow you to treat me like a child who can't be trusted with her own future. If you want to be part of my life going forward, you need to start treating me with the respect you would give any other adult." After I hung up the phone, I sat in my empty living room and cried. I cried for the relationship Jennifer and I used to have, when she was young and needed me. I cried for the years I had spent diminishing myself to avoid conflict with her. Most of all, I cried for the mother I had been, who had somehow raised a daughter who could remove her from her own life with such casual efficiency. But I also felt something else rising in my chest. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, something that felt like freedom. The next few weeks were challenging. Jennifer called repeatedly, alternating between anger and concern. She insisted that I was making a mistake, that I was being stubborn and impractical. David stopped by one afternoon while I was shopping for new furniture. He let himself in with the key Jennifer had never returned and was waiting in my living room when I came home with my first purchase, a comfortable reading chair in soft blue fabric. "Margaret," he said, "we need to talk. Jennifer is beside herself with worry about you. This whole situation has gotten out of hand." I set down my purse and looked at this man who had been part of my family for 15 years but had never really seen me as a person in my own right. "David," I said, "why did Jennifer give you a key to my house?" "She wanted me to check on you, to make sure you were managing okay on your own." I held out my hand. "I need you to give me that key now, David. This is my home, and no one enters it without my permission." His face flushed red. "You're being unreasonable, Margaret. We're family. We're trying to help you." I walked over to the phone on my kitchen counter. I picked up the receiver and began dialing. "Who are you calling?" David asked. "The police," I said calmly. "I am calling to report that someone has entered my home without permission and is refusing to return my key." David stared at me for a moment, then pulled the key from his pocket and placed it on my counter. He left without saying another word. That night, I changed all the locks on my house. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chen had been watching these developments with growing concern. She knocked on my door the next morning with a casserole and a gentle offer to talk. Mrs. Chen was 81 years old and had been widowed for nearly a decade. "You know," she said as we sat in my kitchen sharing her homemade soup, "my Robert went through something similar with his sister when I decided to keep driving after I turned 75. Linda was convinced I was going to kill myself or someone else. She actually tried to have my doctor declare me unfit." "What did you do?" I asked. "I took a driving test at the DMV, passed with flying colors, and then I took Linda out for a very long, very safe drive around town. Sometimes we have to prove our competence to our own children." Mrs. Chen helped me understand that what I was experiencing with Jennifer was part of a larger pattern that many elderly people face. Adult children, often motivated by genuine love and concern, sometimes cross the line from helpful support to controlling interference. She also introduced me to her book club, a group of 6 women between the ages of 68 and 83, who met every Thursday at the library. These women had collectively navigated widowhood, divorce, health scares, difficult children, and every other challenge that comes with living a long life. They welcomed me with warmth and understanding. 3 weeks after I had refused to move to Sunset Manor, Jennifer called with a different tone in her voice. She sounded tired and uncertain, which was unusual for my daughter who always seemed to have all the answers. "Mom," she said, "I don't understand what happened between us. I thought I was helping you. I thought I was being a good daughter." I closed my eyes and tried to find the right words. "Jennifer, you were trying to be helpful, but you forgot to include me in decisions about my own life. You saw problems that needed solving, but you didn't consider that I might have different solutions in mind. But you seemed so lost after Dad died. You forgot things, you seemed sad all the time, and I was scared something would happen to you." For the first time in our recent conversations, I heard genuine emotion in Jennifer's voice rather than frustration or impatience. I realized that her attempts to control my life had come from fear rather than malice. "I was sad, sweetheart," I said gently. "I was grieving your father and learning how to live without him. Grief sometimes looks like confusion or incompetence, but it's actually just the hard work of adjusting to a new reality. I needed time and patience, not management." We talked for over an hour that night. really talked in a way we hadn't done in years. Jennifer told me about her own fears of losing me, about the pressure she felt to be responsible for everyone in the family. I told her about the loneliness I had felt when she started treating me like a problem to be solved rather than a mother who might have wisdom of her own. By the end of our conversation, we had reached a new understanding. Jennifer agreed to stop making unilateral decisions about my life. And I agreed to be more open about asking for help when I needed it. We established appropriate boundaries. She could offer assistance and advice, but I would make the final decisions about my own life. The following Saturday, Jennifer came over with her children to help me continue furnishing my house. It was the first time in months that she had visited without an agenda or a list of things she thought I should do differently. We spent the afternoon shopping for a new couch and ended up buying one that neither of us had originally liked, but that we both somehow fell in love with. Over the following months, Jennifer and I slowly rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect rather than her assumption of my incompetence. She still worried about me, but she learned to express that worry as concern rather than control. I also began building a life that was more fully my own than it had been in years. I joined Mrs. Chen's book club and discovered that I loved discussing literature with people who brought decades of life experience to every conversation. I started volunteering at the local elementary school, reading to children who reminded me why stories matter so much. Most surprisingly, I began taking art classes at the community college. I had always wanted to learn to paint, but during my married years, there had always been something more pressing. At 73, I finally had the freedom to pursue something simply because it brought me joy. One afternoon, about 6 months after the Sunset Manor crisis, I was painting in the garden behind my house when Jennifer stopped by unexpectedly. She found me at my easel, working on a landscape of the maple tree that had been dropping leaves the morning she called to tell me about her plans for my future. "Mom," she said, settling into the garden chair beside me, "that's really beautiful." I stepped back to look at my work with fresh eyes. The painting was far from perfect, but it captured something true about the light in my garden and the way the seasons change everything while leaving the essential beauty intact. "I never knew you wanted to paint," Jennifer said. "I never had time before," I replied. There was always something else that seemed more important. We sat quietly for a while, watching the late afternoon sun filter through the leaves. The silence between us was comfortable now, filled with understanding rather than tension. Jennifer finally spoke again. "I think I spent so many years worrying about taking care of you that I forgot you might want to take care of yourself." I reached over and took her hand. "Sweetheart, the best way you can take care of me is by trusting me to know what I need and asking me how you can help instead of deciding for me what kind of help I should want." Later that evening, after Jennifer had gone home to her own family, I walked through my house. Looking at the furniture I had chosen and the paintings I was learning to create, and the books I was reading with my new friends, everything in my home reflected my own taste and needs and dreams. I thought about the morning Jennifer had called to tell me about Sunset Manor. How shocked I had been to discover that my own daughter saw me as incapable of managing my own life. But I also thought about the strength I had discovered in myself when I finally said no to a future I didn't want. Most importantly, I had learned that it's never too late to reclaim your own story. At 73, I was finally living a life that was authentically mine, filled with relationships based on mutual respect and activities that brought me genuine joy. The phone rang as I was getting ready for bed, and I saw Jennifer's name on the caller ID. For just a moment, I felt the old familiar flutter of anxiety. But when I answered, she simply said, "Good night, Mom." "I love you." "Good night, sweetheart," I replied. "I love you too." After I hung up the phone, I realized that those simple words carried a different weight now. They were an expression of love without conditions, without hidden agendas, without the assumption that love meant the right to control. At 73 years old, I had finally learned the most important lesson of my life. That growing older doesn't mean growing smaller. And that love without respect is not really love at all. I had reclaimed not just my house and my furniture and my right to make my own choices, but something much more precious. I had reclaimed myself.